Hey, what's up everyone? How's it going? This is Waj, and in this video we'll be doing a full-on review of the latest tablet from Dell. This is the Venue 8 7840. Now, what makes this tablet special from all of the other Android tablets out there is certainly its very sleek and unique design. It has a bezel-less design, and it's one of the thinnest tablets in the marketplace right now. And after using this tablet for a couple of days as my daily driver, I really like a lot of aspects about it. But there are some minor concerns that I do have about the tablet that might inform you better on whether this tablet is right for you. So without any further ado, let's get right into this review. The Dell Venue 8 7840 is one of the thinnest tablets in the world right now, only measuring about 6 millimeters, and that's really darn impressive considering that it is still made out of really high components, anodized aluminum, and has an excellent overall fit and finish. In terms of overall body dimensions, it measures about 215.9 millimeters in terms of its height, and about 124.2 millimeters in terms of its width. So it's a little bit taller than most 7-inch tablets, but it's certainly very narrow indeed because it doesn't have any bezels, as you can see. Now, speaking of the bezels, it really reminds me of that Sharp AccuOS phone that came out very recently that has an extremely thin bezel, and this is one of the first generation tablets to kind of employ that bezel-less design. Now, in terms of the bezel itself, the distance between the display and the edge of the bezel is only about 6 millimeters, and with a screen size of 8.4 inches, it has a screen to body ratio of 76.3%, which is one of the largest ratios in any tablet that you can get in the world. Now, that being said, there is quite a big lip at the bottom of the device. Now, that contains the stereo speaker as well as a front-facing camera, but between the screen and that section, there is a 10 millimeter dead space that has pretty much no functionality. I'm sure they had to put that space in order to fit all of the components inside, but it would have been really nice to see no gap between the display and the speaker component itself. In terms of the physical controls, on the left side of the device, we have a power standby switch, followed by a volume button. The bottom of the device contains a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack and a central mounted micro USB cable for charging and data transferring. And on the right side of the device, we do have a micro SD expansion slot, which will allow you to upgrade the internal memory up to 512 gigabytes. Now, the build quality, as I mentioned before, is really quite exceptional. It's made out of really high quality anodized aluminum, and it has an extremely nice fit and finish above most of the Android tablets that you're going to come across. Now, in terms of ergonomics, the only problem I have with devices that have virtually no bezel is, especially in a handheld device, is you're kind of awkward in terms of finding the best position and the way that you hold the device with your hand. You can't really hold a device that has no bezels on the side because you have nothing to really grab onto besides the screen itself, which is going to cause some viewing issues. And certainly you have that portion at the bottom of the device that contains a speaker, but that's a compromise as well, because if you're going to listen to any audio while holding it with your hand, you're probably going to block out some of the noise coming out of the speaker. And this is not really a problem with the tablet itself. It's really a design philosophy that we're going to have to deal with, because as devices have bigger and bigger screens, and the bezels on the screen are eventually going to vanish altogether, leaving you with just a display and no borders altogether. We're going to have to develop a new way of using these devices that have no borders around the screen. And perhaps an idea could be is if we invent some kind of levitation device that will allow the phone or tablet to basically hover over your hand, and you can manipulate the tablet using telepathy. And until somebody kickstarts a tablet project like that, we're probably not going to see a good solution to this problem. But it's certainly cool looking. I like devices that have very thin bezels and larger screens, but I think eventually we're definitely going to have to figure out some kind of solution on how to hold these handheld devices when they have no bezels. Now, moving along, one of the absolute best parts of this tablet to me is definitely that organic LED screen. It has a fantastic native resolution of 2560 by 1600. That's over quad HD resolution, and it has one of the highest PPI counts in the marketplace of over 359 PPI, and with really great color reproductions and excellent black levels. Because it's an organic LED display, we definitely have an excellent experience in terms of viewing all sorts of content. The only downside with OLED technology is when you're viewing it in really bright conditions, it's not as bright as a traditional LED backlit display. In fact, this display itself has a maximum brightness level of about 231 nits. Now, another big highlight of this tablet is the front-facing stereo speakers, which for the most part sound pretty good, above average than most of the tablets that you'll encounter. And because they're front facing, they're going to direct the sound directly at you, and they do an excellent job of filling up any kind of environment that you're in. The speaker system is also controlled by a piece of software called Max Audio, which is developed by Waves. And within the Max Audio app, you can select one from 4 different presets, whether that be for gaming, vocals, music, and movies. And each setting basically adjusts the master EQ and amplitude of the bass and treble frequencies. So it's basically an EQ system that enhances the audio, much in the same vein as we've seen in the HTC phones with the boom sound enabled, where it basically enhances the bass and trebles to give you the impression that the sound is clearer than it actually is. Now, looking at the internal specifications, the Dell Venue 8 is powered by an Intel Atom processor, which is a Z3580, and it's a quad-core processor clocked at about 2.3 gigahertz, and it has 2 gigabytes of RAM, which should be plenty for most of the things you'll do in this tablet. Now, the only kind of minor issue you have with this processor is its single-core thread speed. It's not as fast as other mobile processors from Apple and Qualcomm, but in terms of multi-threaded applications, it definitely is up there with most of the tablets in this category. Now, looking at the Antutu benchmarks, it gets about 45,000 in terms of its score, which is definitely representative of what the Intel processor can do. It's certainly not as fast as some of the latest generation chips from Qualcomm, such as the 805 or the Apple A8X, but certainly not bad for tablets in its category. Now, probably one of the biggest issues in terms of performance definitely has to be the GPU. It uses a PowerVR G6 430, which is very similar to what we find on the Apple A7 chip, which is found in the latest generation iPad mini. And overall, in terms of most kind of casual games, it definitely doesn't do a bad job. But since it has so many pixels to drive, it definitely struggles on more graphically intensive titles. So in most regards, it's definitely playable, but certainly not as fast as other tablets in its category, such as the Nexus 9 and the NVIDIA Shield. Now, in terms of the software, the Dell Venue 8 7000 series, it's running KitKat 4.4 in terms of its launch operating system, and eventually there is plans to be upgradable to Android 5 Lollipop, which certainly would be nice on this tablet. One thing I do like about the Venue series is they don't really put a lot of bloatware in there, and you have a generally nice, pure Android experience, which I'm a big fan of. Now, if you take a look at the back of the device, you'll actually see that we encounter 3 different cameras. The one camera is your standard 8 megapixel sensor, which can do obviously 8 megapixel stills and 1080p video. And then we have 2 other 3D cameras, which are both 720p in terms of resolution, and they're running on a piece of technology called RealSense, which primarily measures the difference between different objects at a distance of 3 to 16 feet. Now, what you can do with this technology is basically do selective post-focusing. So you can take a picture and then focus different parts of your photos later on, and it gives you this kind of fake bokeh effect, which doesn't look that good in my opinion. And it's very similar to basically the dual camera setup we saw on the HTC M8. The other kind of interesting thing you can do with these cameras is measure distances between objects within the image. So if you're in that sweet spot of 3 to 16 feet, you can actually determine the distance between one point of the image to the other point of the image. And they're using a lot of this RealSense technology to develop all these different gesture controls and things like that. But unfortunately, they're not really utilizing it to the best capabilities possible. I'd have to say, in terms of most parts, it's definitely kind of a gimmick at this point, but it will be interesting to see how this technology plays out in the future. Now, besides the 3D camera capabilities, I think the overall image quality in terms of stills and videos is fairly mediocre, pretty bad overall low light performance. In most cases, in any condition that it doesn't have really good lighting, you're definitely going to suffer from a lot of noise, and the color reproduction isn't as good as other 8 megapixel cameras, such as the one found in the Nexus 9 and things like that. And certainly nowhere comparable to some of the smartphone cameras that are very competitive right now. Now, the very last thing that we're going to talk about is a battery life. Now, one of the great things about this tablet definitely has to be its overall battery performance. Compared to pretty much every other tablet that I came across within this kind of small size, this is getting probably one of the best battery performance that I've tested. When you're doing just general stuff, web browsing and things like that, it seems to last for days. But basically, based on my test, I got around 12 hours of normal everyday usage. That's watching a little bit of video, doing a lot of web browsing, and just using the tablet occasionally every 10 to 15 minutes. So definitely really good performance overall, and certainly class leading in the small tablet category. Now, just to sum up everything we talked about, I'm just going to do a quick pros and cons list like I do with all of my reviews to kind of get a better picture of how I feel about this tablet. So starting with the pros, I definitely have to say that I'm a huge fan of the design of this tablet, especially in terms of its aesthetic bezel-less look. Furthermore, in terms of pure street cred, this is one of the thinnest and lightest tablets that you can get out there. Furthermore, I am a huge fan of the display on this tablet. I think it's one of the best displays on any mobile platform right now, especially with that super high resolution and screen density. You get insane amount of details and color depth, and plus that OLED display gives you really great black levels. Sure, the whites aren't going to be as bright as a traditional LED display, but I'm not really too concerned about this because most of the time I'm going to use it indoors anyways. And coupled with that front-facing speaker system, I think this is one of the best tablets for any kind of multimedia experience. Continuing forth, I think in terms of overall fit and finish and build materials, it's probably one of the best Android tablets in the marketplace, with a beautiful anodized aluminum chassis that feels extremely solid, and the level of design and engineering is up there from any Apple tablet and even the Microsoft Surface Pro series of tablets. And lastly, in terms of other tablets in this category, the battery life is quite fantastic, getting over the 10 to 11 to 12 hour range, depending on how you use it. I think this is a really quite a flexible tablet that you'll have no problem doing a whole bunch of different multimedia stuff throughout the day, not being concerned about battery life. Now, my list of cons starts with the overall ergonomics of the tablet. Firstly, because it's a bezel-less design, it's kind of awkward to hold. And even though, as we talked about, you have this bottom lip part over here, using it when you're watching any kind of videos or something like that, you're going to block the speaker. So there's no real proper way to hold this tablet. And again, we're going to have to solve this issue of making devices that have no bezels and figuring out a way to actually use them with your hands, because these are handheld devices in the first place. Furthermore, another problem with the ergonomics has to do with the placement of the rear-facing camera, which is again right on that bottom portion of the screen. And most of the time when I was taking photos, it got in the way. My finger was blocking the camera all the time. They should have relocated at the top of the tablet where it would have made more sense, but that's certainly kind of a design flaw in my opinion. Now, continuing with the theme of cameras, I think in terms of raw image quality, both in terms of stills and video capabilities, it's pretty mediocre by most modern standards of tablets. It's certainly not even close to anything what you would expect to see from, let's say, the iPad Air 2 or any of the smartphones, and even the Nexus 9 I think has a better camera combination system. And although it has a couple of those 3D depth gimmicks and things like that, which could be interesting for the future, right now they're just plainly just gimmicks. Additionally, in terms of the GPU performance, if you're a serious Android gamer, I don't know if that's a thing, but there's a lot of people that are playing a lot of Android games these days, and Android games are becoming more and more sophisticated in terms of GPU architecture and utilizing more powerful graphic GPUs built into these mobile devices. And I think the PowerVR GPU that's in here is really outdated and quite inadequate for most modern Android gaming standards, even though it can do most of your simple games, but anything that's a little bit more 3D intensive certainly tends to struggle a bit more than it really should. Now, lastly, one of the biggest problems I have with the Dell Venue 8 7000 series is regarding its price tag. It retails for around that $400 mark, and at that kind of higher end tablet price range, it's right in the firing lines of the iPad Mini 3 and the Nexus 9, which are both fantastic Android and iOS tablets that offer a lot for pretty much everybody out there. And certainly what you're paying for over here is that design, the build quality, and the fit and finish. And certainly there are no kind of major problems with this tablet. As you saw from my list of cons versus the list of pros, there's really nothing kind of special either besides the overall design. So it's really not as pretty internally as it is externally. And that right there might be one of the biggest problems for some people in order to justify that high asking price. But on that, guys, that's really it. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the Dell Venue 8 7000 series. Do you think it's a tablet worth getting over the competition edition. What are the features that you do and don't like about it? Love to hear all your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. Make sure to give us a thumbs up if you like the video, and check back to our channel. I actually did a head-to-head comparison between this tablet and the iPad Mini 2, which is very similar to the iPad Mini 3. So if anybody's kind of interested in seeing how this tablet directly compares against the iPad Mini, definitely check out that video. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you later. Take care.